evening. My name is Bernard. Welcome to a special edition of the Hypnotist Bernie Exposition. A lot of people ask me that when people are hypnotized, are they faking it? What kind of scientific proposition and what kind of scientific evidence does hypnotists have to support what they actually do in the clinic? I've been asked these questions many times, and I would like to take this opportunity to address to everybody that is sitting at home right now the scientific evidence and the scientific validity of hypnosis and the scientific validity of continuing to use hypnosis and continue to research hypnosis. Now let's just set some boundary. What do we mean by science? Some people may think that science is all about complex equations, heavy instruments, and textbooks that are 5 or 6 inches thick that nobody knows how to read it and nobody could understand how it is and how difficult they had a time going through high school. But remember, that is just taking a class in science. Science, in its very pure sense, comes down to 3 criteria: that a certain experiment can be predictable, could be measurable, and could be repeatable. Now, let us put that into some context. For example, let's pretend I have a ball in my hand. If I drop it here, we can pretty much predict what's going to happen to the ball. It's going to hit the ground. Fixing it to the first scientific principle, which is predictability. We can also measure how fast the ball is dropping, and the result is measurable, which means that when the ball hits the ground, it hits the ground. So it is objective and measurable, and could be put in, and could be repeat this experiment. Now, repeatability comes down to this. If I take this ball away from this room and drop it down the street, A, we can predict what's going to happen. B, we can measure objectively that the ball is going to hit the ground and how fast it is going and how much impact it has on the ground and on the ball. And the third criteria, which we're doing right here, is repeatability. Is that every time I drop the ball here or down the street, we can repeat this experiment over and over again. And anybody could take a ball, raise it to a certain height and drop the ball, and he can pretty much predict, measure, and repeat this procedure over and over again, making that scientific. Now, of course, there are sciences which are highly developed and complicated. If you look at science like genetics, at this point, a lot of people would have a difficult time understanding the jargon and the latest research in genetic engineering. But let us remember that at the beginning of genetic research, it is all about breeding plants and looking at their offspring. Something that is repeatable, predictable, and repeatable. At this juncture, hypnosis is developed at the same point when Mendel developed his first genetic experiment. Of course, you can lay down all kinds of jargons, you can lay down all kinds of dynamics to that experiment in today's term and today's jargon and in today's theory. But for Mendel, it is all about observing, categorizing, to make sure that his results are predictable, measurable, and repeatable. And that is what I mean by science and the scientific endeavor in the field of hypnosis and hypnotherapy. There are a lot of critics on hypnosis and hypnotherapy, and they're mostly born in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, where at the time, psychology is dominated by behavioral science. At the time, I believe it served its relevance, but at this point, a lot of psychologists, a lot of scientists, a lot of medical profession could agree that there's a lot missing in behavioral science. What behavioral science is looked for is antecedents and results. And to broaden and generalize to that extent, we are able to use it and apply it in very broad sense. Yet at the same time, when you generalize a theory to that broad sense and try to force it into every facet of human mind and behavior, a lot of people found that behavioralist theory missed a lot of things. When it comes down to it, behavioralists argue that people are conditioned to do such a thing, and then they do such a thing. Now, to put that into analogy of why it doesn't work, it's like if somebody asks me how to get to Paris, or somebody wants to explain to their friends of how I got to Paris from New York, all they have to say, if they're behavioralists, is that my intention to go to Paris. I brought a ticket, and I took a taxi when I got there, and then I took an airplane, and then I brought a ticket, and then come back here. Their theory does not explain what happens on my trip to Paris. They did not explain the flight there, and they did not explain the mechanism of the custom and my luggage and what I did in Paris. So, to that extent, that kind of theory falls apart. And in the 90s and, in this century, scientific evidence and scientific insights are looking for more into the mechanism of how things work. The criticism of people are faking it or hypnosis is not real, predicated upon this behavioralist argument. They say that if people believe in hypnosis, then it must be the reason why it is happening. But that does not explain what happened in hypnosis, right? It's like, if I believe that I can go to Paris, I can do a bunch of things to get me to Paris, but it does not explain how I got to Paris. This is where the scientific arguments comes in. So let's examine the first criticism. I'm going to go through the three major criticisms, and then I'm going to use experimental results to reply to this criticism. The first criticism is what I've already been talking about, is that they say people are faking and they're pretending. Second criticism that I hear most when people are trying to dissect hypnosis is that it is only effective with other psychological technique, meaning that hypnosis became a subcategory of psychology. And the last argument that most people have for criticizing hypnosis is that the notion that hypnosis is a passive state. So when they do experiments, when people are in a passive state, such as sleeping or an anesthetic, the experiment does not work, or they do not yield the result of statistical relevance. Therefore, the criticism is that hypnosis didn't work. Now let me reply to them in the following experiments. In 1988, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill Medical School did an experiment. They wonder, when people are hypnotized to feel hungry, do they actually feel hungry? Now, if you put that into the behavioralist context, they're going to say that, oh, people are hungry because they didn't eat. But that does not explain the mechanism of feeling hungry, right? So they argue that if people are just pretending to be hungry, or people are actually hungry, there must be some kind of physiological difference, right? Now, if the people are pretending to be hungry, the behavioralist who study only the observation of the behavior will fully satisfy on the observation if somebody is just pretending to be hungry. Let's say you pretend to be hungry, you can go to the fridge, look through the things, you can act like you're in emotional distress. You can do, you can look like you're fainting or whatever that is the behavior of starvation or hungry. But physiologically, if somebody is starving, if somebody is hungry, it shows a difference in how the stomach operates. It shows a difference in how the stomach acid is being excreted. It shows a lot more physiological responses other than just the observable behavior. So this is where the genius of this experiment comes in. Down there in Chapel Hill, the experimenter uses a professional hypnotist to hypnotize a small group of people to tell them that they're actually feeling hungry and that they're hallucinating that they're actually feeling hungry. The genius of this experiment is that he has a control group of people that are faking to be hungry. And to that extent, strictly from a one-way mirror kind of observation post, one cannot distinguish the person who is actually hypnotized to be hungry or the person who is just faking to be hungry. Now that said, how do we know that the person is actually feeling hungry? Since this is a medical school, what they did is that they measure the kind of stomach acid that is being secreted and the amount of stomach acid being secreted. And the results find that the people that are actually hypnotized secrete a lot more stomach acid than the people who are just faking to be hypnotized or conditioned to be hungry or pretending to be hungry. Now, in that case, we have found a solid physiological difference between the people that are hypnotized and the people who are not, and people only responding to behavioralist conditioning. Setting the case that A, these people are not pretending, B, it does not require a psychological, clinical psychological collaboration to make it work, and C, it is not a passive state. People are not passively hungry. They actively secrete stomach acid, unconsciously doing so, making it happen. So therefore, all three criticisms that most academics have for hypnosis were rendered invalid through that experiment. The second experiment I would like to talk to you about happens in the late 1990s. It's where the University of Montreal, which is a pioneer in pain management using hypnosis. Last time I checked, the University of Montreal Hospital managed about a couple of hundred surgeries each year using hypnosis without anesthetic or with very minimal anesthetic. The research that they have done is that they want to look at the neural pathway of the people who are hypnotized to not feel pain. What they have found is that there's an active signal sending by the brain onto the nerve signal, neutralizing the pain signals from getting to the brain. Now, what does it mean? What the experiment shows is more than just lighting up the screen and fancy graphics and, talking about neurons and all. What it shows is that hypnosis is an active process and something real is actually happening. Now they did this experiment against people who are not hypnotized, but who are told to suck it up and who are told to not to show that they are in pain. What they found is that these people does not have the same physiological and neurological response as the people who are actually hypnotized to not feel pain. So what does it mean? It means that in the case of pain relief, there are clear physiological, measurable evidence that hypnosis is a real phenomenon, that people are not pretending. A, it shows up experimentally that people are not pretending. And it shows a difference between the sample group of people that are pretending and the people that are actually hypnotized. And furthermore, you have to argue that it is very difficult to condition yourself to just say not to feel pain when an open surgery is happening. The second argument against hypnosis, once again, is it is only effective with other psychological technique. In this case, it is clearly not. And there is no cognitive behavioral technique to help you choose which neural pathway that your brain could fire. And C, the argument that hypnosis is a passive state, that hypnosis equates to meditation or hypnosis equates the same thing as taking sleeping pills, is clearly false, because it shows right here that it is an active state that people are in, that the brain is sending active signal through the neural pathway to the person who is under hypnosis. And put this into some context. Let's say somebody is sleeping and you take a knife and you jab him, or you throw some cold water in them. Chances is that they're going to wake up, right? That proves, and that is a clear proof to us, that hypnosis is a real phenomenon. And hypnosis is not the same thing as sleep or meditation or other kind of passive states that we've looked at. It is real, it is active, it is measurable, predictable, and repeatable. Now, a couple of years ago, down the street at Harvard, they did an MRI experiment where it was clearly shown that hypnosis, when people are under hypnosis, the brain operates differently than people who are just pretending. Now, MRI is a new technology, and we are still investing money, and we're still investing time in it. And to schedule a few hours in the MRI machine is a fairly difficult thing to do because it costs a lot of money. But they did it. A few years ago, they did the experiment, and they have people hypnotized to see different colors. And they shows that on the MRI machine. First, they actually have the people see the color red, and they put it under the MRI machine. And the MRI machine shows a certain part of the brain being light up under the machine. Next thing they do is that they have people faking that they see the color red. And they tell the experimenter that they're faking to see the color red. And it shows up on the MRI machine. And then they hypnotize people and then make them hallucinate that they see the color red. And they make a note from the data they collected from the MRI machine. So what happened next is that they found that the people who are faking to see the color red have much fainter neural signals, and they are firing in a very different spot from the people who actually were hypnotized to see the color red when they're under the MRI machine. And what they've also found is that the people who are actually hypnotized to see the color red have a much more closer area of the brain firing when under hypnosis than to the actual position of the brain that was firing when they see the color red, than the people who are faking to tell the experimenter that they are seeing the color red. So through the comparison against placebo and through the comparison against the people who are faking, there's a clear empirical evidence to show that people who are hypnotized are actually experiencing something different than just faking it. And this experiment furthermore answers the chief criticism against hypnosis, that people are faking. No, they're not. Look at this experiment. Under MRI machine, under brain imagery, it is categorically and clearly shown that these people are not faking. B, that it is only effective with other psychological technique. Again, this is quite independent from any other research that is done with psychology and behavioralism or cognitive neurosciences. There's no psychological technique that could be employed for a person to consciously change which part of the brain is firing. Of course, they could prove a lot of other things, but not this part, making hypnosis independent of other psychological theory. The last thing, the last criticism that most people have against hypnosis, which is hypnosis is just a passive state, that people are just taking a nap, or just, give them some sleeping drugs and do some experiment on them. That proposition is also false, because it clearly shows that hypnosis is an active technique, and people who are under hypnosis, their brain works differently from just the response from conditioning by the behavioral scientist. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen who are watching this show right now, that of course these experiments are clear and categorical in showing that hypnosis works. They are also done in such a pioneer way that they could be expanded and could be researched further up on based on these results. Let's take the MRI experiment for now. Aside from arguing that MRI machine could be better, and aside from arguing that we can develop better software, or we can have better imagery of the brain, or we can have a much more frequent scanning of the brain than we can do right now. In a very hypnosis and hypnotist perspective, one could easily see how this experiment may or may not work, because it is so noisy when you stick your head in an MRI machine, and it is so uncomfortable being in the MRI machine. It could be very difficult to sustain hypnotic state. As well as the stomach acid experiment, where there are different kind of instruments that are in your stomach, and how uncomfortable you'll feel in a medical lab when these experimenters are working on you. Even under all these difficult circumstances, hypnosis works. It is proven, it is clear that it works. Even under these circumstances, the pioneer of the experimenter created results that are beyond a doubt that it's working. Second thing we have to consider is that techniques are also very Spartan. The hypnotists only found the people that are susceptible to hypnosis or not susceptible to hypnosis, and they do not have the time to develop a customized set of technique to suit the person who goes under hypnosis. And the instruments that I have talked about of measurement are also in a very pioneer and very early stage. In the future, the techniques could only develop better with more fundings, with more technology electronically, and better measure of instruments. Having an independent field of hypnosis research will further enable this research to continue. With better technique, better technology, we can find better use of hypnosis. Having said that, it is very clear that all the criticism that was originally founded in the 50s, although it works for its time, and it is a measurement and a monument for its time, it is shown to be clearly not applicable in the face of this new scientific development and this new scientific experiments. Seeing this, I would like you who are watching this right now to consider this. That at the infancy, right now, hypnosis and the field of hypnotism is at its infancy, right? And we have already proven to you that hypnosis is beyond the understanding and beyond the arguments and the confine by the psychologist. Even though they both deal with the mind, psychologists does not have an answer extending into hypnosis, and they could not answer in precision and correctly on the things that hypnotists are able to do. And neither does the medical doctors have a clear answers of why and how this is happening. They show us that this is happening. And with an independent field of hypnosis, the research could only get better. Our understanding could only get better. We can only do more with our understanding of our mind. At the end of the day, arts and science are the same. Show but not tell. What scientists have shown you, ladies and gentlemen, is that hypnosis clearly works, it is predictable, it is measurable, and it is repeatable. Thank you for joining me tonight. Hope to see you next week.